So another nut shot up a school. Hell, he even shot his grandmother in the face. What an asshole. But as predicted, we were immediately bombarded with a bunch of gun-grabbing ads on TV and all over the internet. It's almost like they had these things ready to go, just waiting for the next tragedy. Hello everyone, I'm Bobtheorc, and today we will be explaining guns, mass shootings, and the Second Amendment. But first, I want to give you a word from our sponsor, me! Yes, that's right, I'm sponsoring my own video because I don't make any money from this stuff. I'd like to tell you guys about my dad. My dad is a retired economist. He's a PhD economist. He taught at 6 universities all around the world, and even worked for the Federal Reserve Bank for a while. Back in 1978, he wrote a book about how to beat inflation. And recently, now that he's retired, he decided to rewrite the book and update it because, well, prices are going up. We've got crazy inflation and the economy kind of stinks. And we're giving the book away for free on our website, on my website. And you can make copies and send them to your friend just as long as you acknowledge that my dad wrote it. Because the information's useful and people need to know what's going on and how to protect themselves against all the problems that we're going to have. So that's, before we get started, I just want to tell you about that. You can check it out at bobtheorc.com/books, and I will put descriptions, I'll put links in the description below, in the text below the video, and I'll reference a few other things I'll talk about during this video. All right, so first off, let's talk about guns and why Americans are so committed to maintaining their weaponry. Let's ignore the fact that it's the Second Amendment and that it's in the Constitution and that the government doesn't have any right to take away our guns in the first place. We'll let the lawyers argue that one out. Let's talk about this from a historical standpoint. Atrocities are always committed against a disarmed population. You know, whether it's the Nazis in World War II genociding a bunch of Jews, they took away the guns first and then they did the genocide. Or look at Australia with their crazy COVID stuff they did. You know, the Australians gave up their guns a number of years ago, and now they've got an authoritarian government when it comes to lockdowns and mandates and all that stuff. And if you look here in the United States, the craziest stuff always happens in the areas where the population's unable to defend itself. That's just how it works. And so conservatives and even leftists who appreciate their ability to defend themselves, they're not going to give up their guns. There is no debate. They're just not going to do it. They won't talk to you about it, and they'll think you're crazy for suggesting. And it's obvious that, you know, at least to the conservatives, that the only reason the government's trying to restrict gun ownership is because they want to enact all the crazy policies that they normally can't get away with. So authoritarians need a disarmed population, otherwise the population will tell them to jump off a bridge. That's just the truth of it. Another point I'd like to make is lawful gun owners reduce crime. There's no debate on this. You know, there's various FBI studies and university studies that took place under the Obama administration that showed that armed populations, lawful gun owners, reduce crimes. They especially reduce violent crimes. And if you look at the areas that have the highest crimes, they tend to also have the lowest lawful gun ownership and the most restrictive gun laws. Now, you might not be told this, but that's because they're lying to you. They don't want you to know that lawful gun owners greatly reduce crime. You know, right now I'm hanging out in Oklahoma. Probably half the people here, you know, probably more than that in my neighborhood have guns. We've got a relatively crime-free neighborhood. And I'm not even in the nice part of town. Also, armed countries are hard to invade. I had a conversation a few years ago. I was visiting a friend, some friends in Ukraine, and we were talking. And they're like, you know, Mark, why is it that all you Americans, you know, love your guns so much? And we talked about it some. And I was like, and also, nobody's ever going to invade us. The armed American population outnumbers every military in the world by like a factor of 5. That's why the Japanese never even considered invading America in World War II. Yamamoto said there'd be a rifle behind every blade of grass. And recently, the Ukrainian, friend was telling me that they could just never picture themselves, using a weapon. well, now she's drafted in the army, and we had kind of an "I told you so" moment not too long ago. And if you look at it in Ukraine, I made a video talking about this. Armed civilians attacking Russian supply convoys caused a real mess north of Kiev. So, imagine if the entire population were armed like in America. The Russians wouldn't have been able to do, near what they're doing without having to kill off a lot of civilians. And there's a lot of reason to believe they're trying to minimize that. It just makes things a lot more difficult. Now, the normal argument that you hear the governments make is that, armed population can't deal with tanks and F-16s. I think a certain elderly man in the White House may have said that, or maybe it was some other politician. I don't remember. You hear that argument a lot. Here's what happens in a lot of these countries, and you see this often in countries plagued by civil war. Whenever there's government overreach that gets to the point of an outright armed conflict, you tend to find that the family members of the government officials or the family members of the military committing the genocide, those guys, those family members tend to become targets. And while, a civilian with a rifle can't do much against a tank or an airplane, they can shoot up a supply convoy, and they can capture or harm the family members of the people attacking them. Typically speaking, if you look at the German occupation in World War II, we armed the French resistance, and they did things like blow up bridges and assassinate collaborators or conspirators with the Nazis, and they caused a lot of trouble that tied up large portions of the German army. And while they didn't directly engage in frontal combat, the guerrilla warfare behind the scenes is a real pain in the ass. Look at how much trouble America ran into in Afghanistan recently, or in Vietnam, with basically just armed civilians. So no, an armed population makes it nearly impossible to invade and hold a country unless you genocide the whole population, and even then it's very difficult. So a lot of, if you look at it, a lot of the people pushing for you get rid of the guns and we'll stop the crime, they're just ignorant. They're dangerously ignorant. And one of the things that people don't seem to understand is that guns don't kill people, people kill people. And you find this, just examples throughout history that if somebody wants to kill somebody else, they're going to find a way to do it. Most murders in America are committed with blunt objects and knives, hammers, rocks, chairs, strangulation. Guns make up a small percentage of murders in America. And of the gun deaths in America, the vast majority of them are suicide. And, I don't mean to sound morbid, but if you're going to kill yourself, you might as well use a gun and get it over with as quickly as possible. Not that I think people should kill themselves. I think they should get mental health and help instead. But if you take away the murders, or if you take away the suicides from the murders, that gets rid of a lot of the gun crime in America. And also, if you were to separate America out as two different countries, if you had the large populated cities that are full of crime and compare that to the rural areas, like Chicago is more dangerous than most war zones in the gang-ridden areas, whereas rural America is one of the safest places in the world. And so they tend to conflate a lot of the data, because the real objective is to make a disarmed, subservient population. That's what all governments want. Even the American government. I mean, we're more resilient to that because we have regular elections, we have a strong constitution, and we have an armed population that enforces the strong constitution. So, what's the first thing that Stalin did after the Soviet Revolution? He disarmed the population. The Ukrainians wouldn't have gotten starved to death and genocided by Stalin if he hadn't disarmed them first. What did Mao do when he starved his people to death? He disarmed them. Bad, authoritarians need to disarm population. Another thing to consider is that criminals, by definition, don't obey the law. If they obeyed the law, they wouldn't be a criminal. And if a law-abiding person breaks the law, then suddenly they become, by definition, a criminal. And if you make guns illegal, people aren't going to give up their guns. They're just going to become criminals. And, when I was growing up in New York, guns are illegal there. I mean, for the most part, it's very difficult to get a gun in New York unless you get an illegal gun, in which case, you just, a guy and you give him some money and you get one. And, I never bought a gun in New York, but I was offered. I had the opportunity. I was a fucking kid. And I guarantee you, the kids that mugged me with a .45 when I was young, I'm sure that wasn't a legal gun. And so you can get guns illegally. Yeah, it's a little bit harder, but you're not going to stop that. Criminals are not going to stop being criminals just because you say, oh no, you can't have that gun anymore. You have to turn it in. Only law-abiding people will turn in their guns. The criminals won't, and they'll continue to be criminals. So let's talk about mass shooters. And the school shootings that we see are tragedies, but they're almost predictable. They follow a very predictable format. In nearly every case, the mass shooters involved were already known to the police or to the school administration. Somebody already knew there was a problem. They posted crazy shit on social media. The most recent shooter, apparently, I haven't looked into it yet. I won't really look into it too much for probably a week or two until we have more information. But allegedly, he posted stuff on social media saying, hey, I'm going to go shoot my grandmother. Hey, I just shot my grandmother. Hey, I think I'm going to go shoot up a school now. Everybody, the school administrators know who the trouble kids are. I was talking to my teacher, one of my middle school teachers, amazing guy. I've interviewed him sometimes. He's awesome. I was talking to him about what it was like to be in school, back when I was, we're talking about me as a kid and him as a teacher, a younger teacher. And we had this trip where we went to Frost Valley, and they knew who all the troublesome kids were. They put them all in the same group, and he was in charge of making sure they didn't cause any trouble, and they just kept a close eye on them. And there weren't any problems. The school administrators know who the troublesome kids are, and they know who the good kids are, because that's their job. Why don't they do anything about it? Well, there's probably restrictive rules and regulations. Why aren't these kids, getting mental health? Why aren't they seeing a shrink or something? Why aren't they getting counseling? Hell, when I was a kid, I got attacked by a bully. We got into a big old fight, and I had to go see a shrink also, just because I participated in a fight. I didn't even start the damn fight. Why aren't they doing that at some of these schools that have problems? I think that there's probably deeper issues that we're ignoring, and the media doesn't talk about that, because if the average person knew that these mass shooters were well known to the police and school administration, sometimes even years before the event took place, they'd be super pissed. They'd be really pissed. And finally, what happens when you have lax security plus a gun-free zone? You don't see criminals attacking gun shows. You don't see. I mean, there's a video on the internet of a criminal trying to rob a gun store and he got shot. That seemed like a stupid thing to do. Why is it that criminals always attack gun-free zones that don't have any security? And you're going to say, oh, this school had some security guards, or, yeah, they had some security guards, but what good did it do? They weren't doing their job. I was talking to a retired police chief, and maybe I can get him on for an interview one of these days. We were talking over a steak one day. I love steak, by the way. So if you ever want to, take me out to steak dinner, that's how you get information out of me. So we were hanging out. We were eating a steak together, and we were talking about some of the consulting work that he does. He does consulting for schools here in Oklahoma and help them be more secure. And he was saying that one of the biggest problems that they have with school security is they'll set up these policies, and then the maintenance guy will prop the back door open, or some kid will be going in and out through the back door so they can play hooky or smoke a cigarette out back. And eventually the administrators and the security guards just become lazy. Well, that doesn't do any good. Why is it you don't see mass shootings in airports? Airports are gun-free zones. Oh yeah, they've got the TSA. They got a lot of fucking security there. And those guys take it really seriously. You know, I was on a scout trip once, and this kid had his camping knife in his backpack rather than in the luggage. Man, they stopped him so damn fast. So it's possible to secure schools, and people know how to do it. There's specialists and experts out there that know how to do it. I've consulted with some of these guys. It can be done. You just have to do it. You have to take it seriously, put the money towards it. You know, we spend so much money on so much bullshit in our government, and yet they don't bother taking care of the schools. It's almost like they want these problems to happen because they're corrupt or lazy or incompetent. So, I mean, there's solutions out there. And I don't really want to ramble on too much of this. So we can go into each of these topics, could be a detailed video into itself. I'd like to do a shout out to a friend of mine, a guy named Mark Smith. He's a lawyer, and he's essentially a Second Amendment lawyer. He's an excellent source of information. You know, he's more conservative than I am, but that's okay. I love him anyway. He's a great guy, and he really knows his stuff. So I'm going to put a link to his YouTube channel, and he's taught me an awful lot over the years. So if you have any questions about this stuff, I'd be happy to make a follow-up video. Just ask some comments, ask some questions in the comments below, and I will see everyone next time. Thank you, and have a nice day. Goodbye.